order for September 8th, 2023. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Mrs. Burdick. Here. Mr. Curran.
Here.
Mr. Sear.
Here.
Mr. Demick.
Here.
Mr. Fanton.
Here.
Mrs. Hanchett.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Havey. Mr. Healy.
Here.
Mr. Ricky.
Here.
Mrs. Ricketts Swales.
Here.
Mrs. Root. Mr. Rumfelt. Mr. Stockin. 11 present, 4 absent.
Thank you, ma'am. The original purpose of this committee of the whole was to continue the discussion on ARPA funding and allocations. Because the county treasurer is unavailable to be here today, we pivoted and we're kind of doing a little bit of a salad bowl of stuff to take care of today. So I apologize in advance to the administrative team back there. They're going to be doing most of the lifting today, but let's just get right into it. I'll ask, I think, County Administrator, if you want to help us with agenda item number 3, mileage and conference approvals. So while she's walking up there, 2 separate issues here. So not really issues, just something that needs board clarification. One is mileage reimbursements that the board is provided with. Why don't we start with that? And because that's kind of the sticky wicket, and then we'll go to the conference approvals, and that's just more of a let's all get on the same page kind of thing.
Sounds good. So mileage has been discussed in a cow before, but probably before some of this members, because I think it was the last board, 2018 or 2019, when we first put out some guidance that mileage could be taxable. So depending on where you're going to. Generally speaking, the county, well, not generally, actually very specifically, the county can only reimburse mileage that is actually and necessarily traveled on official business of the county. And that doesn't mean just any old thing. It means it has to relate to your official business, which is your official powers and duties of whatever office you hold. So you could pick, I think there's some people from the treasurer's office. Jenna's here today. Jenna's here for Terry, by the way, if you didn't see her back there, our deputy treasurer. Jenna could be out traveling. She would need to put in mileage for things that are related to her official duties as the deputy treasurer. She couldn't just pick and choose what to go to and try to put mileage in because she liked something that planning was doing. If it didn't really relate to the treasurer's office, she couldn't go to a planning conference and put in mileage for it. And that's not just true for mileage, that's true for any other related expenses.
So is that true for electeds as well as
Correct.
appointed positions?
And it's true for your elected, so all your elected officers, all your elected board members, true for your advisory board members too. You're allowed to pay them mileage, but you can't pay them commuting mileage. So that has also come up if somebody is trying to travel from their home to their official place of business. Like if we don't pay people, we wouldn't pay Jenna, picking on poor Jenna here, to travel from her home to work every day. We can't pay commuting mileage. But we can pay someone to go outside of their office, their official place of work, to go to a conference, to a meeting outside of the confines of where they officially work. So that's generally how mileage works. And it, like I said, it's from every employee that we have through electeds and some of our appointed members out there that we have for like advisory boards.
So if you have I'm going to give you some hypotheticals. Yep. If you have a legislator that sits on STERA, Southern Tier Extension Railroad Authority, that may meet monthly in Salamanca, is that permissible for mileage reimbursement?
It's permissible, and that's an easy one to say because they're appointed by this board to be on STERA, so that is their official business, which they've been appointed for. You would have to pay them mileage if they put in for it.
What if I want to go, I don't sit on STERA, what if I want to go to the STERA meeting to better understand their operations?
So this is where it gets a little bit fuzzier. So you're board chairman, and technically you sit on all these other committees that you might have some business that you feel you need to be there for, and if you have a justification for it, and that is something that we officially support, then I think you probably could put in mileage for it. It gets a little fuzzier because you're not officially appointed to STERA.
So who looks at the mileage sheets and determines, okay, this appears to be legitimate, this appears to be not appropriate for reimbursement?
So what happens on employees and departments would be it would go through their normal claims process and would go through their department, and then it would go over to the treasurer's office, and then they get another set of eyes on it in the treasurer's office. For board members, I think it goes to the clerk of the board's office, and I am a little fuzzy myself. I think all board members used to see it, and that changed a few years back, and now I don't think you approve them in mass like that.
Okay, is it an urban legend that mileage reimbursements used to go through Ways and Means?
I don't know, you'd have to ask Brenda, she probably has more knowledge on that.
They did all used to go through Ways and Means, and we would pass them around the table, and every committee member would review every mileage submission.
Just for the legislators, not
Just for the
everybody else.
legislators,
Okay.
yes, just the legislators.
And
So-
we do have a mileage policy that we passed in 1989 as well, in a resolution.
So have you reviewed that resolution recently?
I have it. Yes, I have reviewed it for other purposes, not for today.
Does it need a refresh, or is that sufficient, and can we just distribute that to the board so we all have a clear understanding of what's reimbursable and what isn't?
It needs a refresh. It's very difficult to understand. We've had this discussion in the past year with departments and trying to help departments understand what is claimable for mileage and what isn't, that I think we need a whole mileage policy. Terry, who's not here today, and I have looked at what the comptroller recommends in mileage policies, and we've started to use some of that guidance with our department heads, like making sure they verify with a map that that's the correct mileage between two distances and not just making up a number, because it has to be actual miles traveled, not just guesstimates.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. County Administrator, are you the authority that now approves the mileage, or is it, because that probably falls under your limitations, right?
I only approve the mileage within my own department, and then if there's a question about mileage in general that comes up during the pre-audit process before you get the full audit, then I would be involved in maybe talking about a particular issue. But no, I only approve the mileage in my own
So
department.
is she responsible for
I
approving?
think Brenda would have to answer that. I'm not quite sure what happened after Ways and Means.
So the mileage and expense vouchers are submitted through Sarah, and we have most of them are just coming to meetings or things that they're specifically appointed to. If there's anything outside that, Sarah will usually bring it to me, and depending on what it is, I may take it to the Committee of Jurisdiction for approval if it's outside something we normally would pay.
And I did mention that we don't pay for commuting. There is one important exception in the law that we pay for commuting cost for board members. So you can get paid from going from your home to meetings. And that's only for Board of Supervisors, Board of Legislators members, not advisory board members. So just to clarify that point.
Yeah.
Gretchen, then Dwight.
I guess the question that I have, just as an example, Office of the Aging Picnic, we went to that. It's not really,
I think that's where it's going to get a little bit fuzzier. Why are you invited there, and what are you doing there? So if you're invited there in your capacity as a board member, and that is an activity that this full board supports, and you're taking an active part when you're there, I think you're serving food or doing
Right.
whatever, I would say there's probably a good claim to be made for mileage to that.
and like planning board dinner and things like that we go to.
I think if it's an official board or something that you recognize that
Okay.
this department set up, but if you're just being invited to go to a Boy Scout dinner, it's even more fuzzier. Probably that's not reimbursable mileage, because you're not there. Obviously, the Boy Scouts aren't part of the county. You're just invited because, they might like to hear from their legislator or want your support.
And one criteria that we sometimes use is in your capacity as legislator, especially for the chairman of the board, are you part of the program? Are you presenting a specific county-related information speech? So that's one of the criteria we use when looking at mileage too, is if you're part of a particular program or agenda.
That's a great point, Brenda.
Or a
Because
committee
sometimes
that-
you are asked to go to present an award as the legislator from that district, or to give a speech or proclamation.
Okay, Dwight?
Yeah, that kind of answers my question.
Mike.
District meetings that we have, our district meetings that we have would be a legitimate mileage?
Yes, because you're required by law, local law of 1969, to have district meetings and to go to them. So yes, that would be mileage. That's definitely acceptable.
Mr. Ricky?
Yeah, let's quit beating around the bush. This is about me taking a drive up to North Lawrence, New York, 321 miles, 6.5-hour drive, to see a methane digester, which could be a possible $20 million investment in the county. I packed a bologna sandwich and I stayed with a friend. I didn't ask for any meal money. I didn't ask for a hotel. I had a drive up and a drive back. I did a tour of the company. I put in for the mileage. About 2 years ago, I was appointed to the IDA, I believe, unanimously by this board to represent this board. And I find it pretty appalling that we can't just, we spend more time, we got a special committee of the whole to worry about a couple $100 in gas, and
Well, in
We spend
fairness,
more
I thought
time
this
on-
would be the fast agenda item, but it's not working out that way.
well, either you pay me or you don't. I don't care. It's not going to make me or break me. I thought that was I always put in, I worked for the IDA for 2 years. I put in my mileage there and the county pays it.
My
So
hope,
what's the difference?
my hope with this conversation was just that we have we get administration to make sure we have an established criteria, so we're all on the same page. Whether or not that means after a certain number of miles, or if it's something that would be perceived as outside of our regular county business, that you get committee approval. I don't know if that should be prior to making the trip or prior to requesting the reimbursement or whatever, but and I know you're over there, Jan. Is that something that we can get to?
I think so. I mean, again, we have mileage issues from the very bottom of the organizational chart all the way up to legislators on what qualifies for mileage and not. I think you as a board need to decide what's within your official business to go to, but we also need to clarify our mileage policy overall to help everybody else understand it.
So could we set that as an agenda item for upcoming, say, Ways and Means meeting to
Yes.
discuss that further and say, okay, what should be reimbursable and what shouldn't be within the confines of state statute?
Yes, and we've had discussions in our department head meetings to help our department heads out on mileage too. I think it's probably all coming to a head where we just need to have some very clear outline of what mileage is about.
Okay. Jan, did you have some?
One of the concerns, since we're talking about this, has been expressed to me, and it relates to Office of the Aging, is it's not what's reimbursable, it's how many miles are reimbursable and who determines from here to there. And it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they have to use Google Maps now to map out their mileage. Now, some, as we know, Office of the Aging, some of the people that they go to are out in the sticks. They might have a different route to go than Google Maps tells them. And somebody is looking at their mileage and then looking at and says, no, it doesn't require that many miles to get there. But it does because of the route they go. So who's making the determination to decide whether they're submitting legitimate miles?
So all mileage by all employees now should have a Google map attached to their mileage invoice to verify the miles they put in. And that came after we had several mileage claims that were excessive to the point where it was double the amount of miles needed to go from one destination to another. So either they need to verify that they actually took a route that took them that many miles or some other way. That is what the comptroller has recommended. That is what is in the state policy for mileage. So it's not just Office of the Aging, it's for everyone. Should attach the Google map. And they can retrace their map in Google Maps. It's not just, from point A to point B, this is the actual route they took. And if it's a standard route they take every time, I would hope that they could just not go into so much hassle every month they put in that invoice.
So we not only have to satisfy the hierarchy here, we also have to satisfy the state comptroller and all this stuff, right?
Yes, and going back, I do wish Terry was here because I think she really explained this a lot better than I did back in 2018 or 2019. Mileage, it can be taxable too, depending on what you're using it for.
One more thing, just, time is of the essence on the trip I took, and I see it could happen on a lot of other times. All the players that needed to be there, I knew about 3 days ahead of time. There's no time to bring it before the board, or I would have. As we all know how fast the board operates, sometimes you gotta take the bull and, just do it.
Thanks. Jan?
Just to follow up to what I asked. So is there actually someone that sits in an office and goes through these mileage sheets and compares what they're presenting versus what Google Maps says they should be presenting?
So
Every mileage that's submitted.
I might lean a little bit on Jenna, but my understanding was about a year and a half ago, we came across some very large problems with mileage that was being presented. And for a time, yes, we went through, I believe, every single claim. We have also now hired an outside company to help us with the pre-audit process, and all those invoices go to Drescher and Malucky, and they go through them. Now, they might not go through every single one. They might pick random ones, samples to do audits, but they do audit all of our claims before they come to me for signature, before they come to the board for signature.
Which the computer age has made all that a lot easier
Correct.
to do. 30 years ago or 20
Yep.
years ago, that's the way.
And it's not just the county coming up with that mileage policy. That is an actual law, in county law and general municipal law on mileage and what is payable and what isn't payable.
Okay. So, not going to solve anything today, probably,
No.
but let's get it on a Ways and Means agenda, and in the interim, did you have something?
I was just going to say, also in response to what Jan was saying, in most departments, the department head is signing off also on those vouchers. Most employees cannot just input a bunch of reimbursements without getting approval.
And the department head should be looking at those invoices before they move on.
So they'll either initial them or put it in, and then another double check is the person inputting the voucher for payment. It's also going through that person. So some of those should be caught before they reach the treasurer's office, we hope.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Conference approvals. Can you just describe that process for us, please?
Okay, again, this comes out of general municipal law, and then the board passed a local law, I think 1993, on conferences. It used to be that the Board of Supervisors had to approve every single employee that went to a conference or a training or something before they went there. We changed that process, I think, in 93, so that the county administrator approves all employees except for the Board of Legislators, and the board chairman approves those. So we have something that we recall a green sheet. It's just a form saying what conference you're going to, what are the dates. Hopefully, most people attach an agenda so that we can see that's the conference. They come to me for all the employees. They would come to the board chairman for the legislators, and you just sign off. You put that authorization to attend in the file, and then when they go to conference, invoice comes in. It gets attached to the invoice when it makes its way over to the treasurer's office. So this was something that we were a little bit lax on, something I talked to the department heads about a couple of years ago, and we're now pretty good with all our departments with their authorizations getting attached to the claims, getting them signed before they go. I did notice that I think maybe our legislators aren't doing it as much. So I think every time you go to NISAC, they're definitely all going through the board chairman. But if somebody is going to a conference with another department, those forms aren't making their way over to our board chairman to sign off. And the law says that you're supposed to sign off on them before you go for us to be able to legally pay the invoice.
So is that the responsibility of the legislator or the department head who's hosting the legislator?
Well, I think, it's probably the responsibility of the legislator, but I think we can reinforce it with our department heads so they make sure if they're asking a legislator to go with them to a conference or a school that they get the green sheet for the legislator and it's going over to Brenda's office.
Okay. That's
I'd
an easy
also
one.
be happy to fill it out for them if they let me know.
Thank you, Brenda.
And then, so who approves the chairman's conferences?
You would approve your own, and I approve my own, and I don't like that, but that's what's in the local law.
Las Vegas, here we come.
Yeah. We could, if we were to ever refresh that, we could reverse it so we approve each other's.
All right. Okay, so that was just an FYI thing. Everybody good on that? All right, we're going to give Carissa a break and ask Allison to give us an update on policies that she and outside counsel have been working on. Good morning.
Good morning.
What's happening in your office?
Too much. So the first policy I'll update the board on is the FOIL policy. So minor changes have been made to public officers law in the past few years, as well as just our FOIL policy for the county, which is in multiple resolutions, needs to be updated. So my office has drafted an update to our county's FOIL policy to reflect these minor changes and also to address issues and concerns that were discussed, I think, back last fall in a public session during Ways and Means Committee meeting, I believe. So that draft was presented to the county administrator and discussed with the administrative team a few weeks ago. The FOIL policy now needs to go through the board committee process for discussion and review and needs to be approved by the full board by resolution to go into effect. And the goal is to make the policy effective by January 1st of 2024. So the board can be looking for that to be on a committee agenda soon.
Great.
The next policy is the ethics policy. Again, that has been updated numerous times by New York State, and there's actually a New York State model ethics policy that they have provided. There's a small internal working group that was formed to discuss what updates we need to make to our ethics policy per this New York State model policy, as well as maybe some additional things that we would like that would be applicable to our county. So my office, along with our outside counsel, have drafted a proposed policy, which we are finalizing, and we will circulate to the working group sometime this month for review and discussion. And then the plan will be that then will be go through the committee process and will need to be discussed by the board through that process, and then it will go to the full board for approval by resolution. So it can go into effect, and the goal is to have that policy approved by the end of the year. So that can also be in effect by January 1st, 2024.
Does that need state approval at all or anything like that?
I do not believe that that will need state approval. However, I will have to also work with Heather Beto in because there is the ethics training component that goes with it. So we'll just have to make sure that whatever our current training component is, we'll have to also be in compliance with what our policy says. And also the policy will also update our financial disclosure form that everyone needs to fill out. I know that's not everybody's favorite thing to fill out, but it is required. And we are also trying to make that to be an easier form to fill out and not as intrusive as people may already think that
Okay.
it is. Regarding our contract processing and procurement policy, we also have a small internal working group that we formed to discuss the needs of streamlining our contract processing process. And one thing that we determined immediately that it was necessary to have an approved policy outlining which types of contracts, leases, grant agreements, maintenance agreements, et cetera, need to come to the full board for approval and have the chairman sign. If there are any of those types of agreements that could maybe need to be approved by the board, but could have the county administrator sign, those types of situations. So with the assistance of our outside counsel, he drafted a draft resolution that kind of outlines different thresholds based somewhat on our current procurement policy. So that will be circulated to the small working group. I know there's already been some side discussions about some of the proposed thresholds and how we might want to change those, and or maybe some exceptions to, all the time having a certain type of agreement, such as grant agreements must always go through the board and always be signed by the board chairman. So the plan is to have the contents of this resolution finalized. Again, as similar with the FOIL policy and the ethics policy, this would have to go through the committee process for discussion and review, and then would have to go to full board for a resolution for it to go into effect. And again, the plan is to have this approved by the end of the year, so it could go into effect by January 1st of 2024. I know I'm calling myself out here publicly, so you're hearing all my plans. Regarding a compliance whistleblower policy, the county is required to have one of these policies. My office has obtained copies of these policies from some other counties to review. My understanding is that there's also been changes to what is required to be included in these policies. So some of the counties that I've obtained samples from, they are also amending their own policies, and I've asked them for copies of their amended policies when they are done. So I am going to be working with our outside counsel on drafting a policy that we can present to the administrative team and to the board to review and discuss. I don't really have a timeline and when that will be prepared. I can't guarantee they'll be done by the end of the year, but if not the end of the year, then hopefully by the springtime.
Do those whistleblower policies that you've seen, do they include a training component as well?
Usually they do
Thank you.
as well. And then lastly, a social media policy. So this is a policy that the county administrator, the deputy county administrator, and I are collaborating on, and this will take some time for us to do. The deputy county administrator has some sample policies for us to review, and there are various legal issues and protections that we will need to consider when creating this type of policy. This is kind of a complex policy, but I know that this is something that has been discussed and mentioned by various legislators to the three of us at various different times. So this is on our radar as well.
So you're busy.
I'm busy with policies and other things.
I think maybe there's been a little bit of deferred maintenance in this regard with our policies. We have some outdated and antiquated policies, and we recognize and appreciate the effort you're putting in getting us back up to speed. Any comments or questions on any of those? That was the last one, right?
That was the last one.
Okay. I'll put you on the spot real quick on the CON application. Any update on that?
So I did speak with our outside counsel about that. What we are doing at this point is we are waiting to get the results from CGR and their report. And I think we are expecting them sometime possibly next month. And once we have that, then he will be ready to start doing everything to get that process moving.
So we'll be passing a resolution requesting that you
Yes.
apply for the CON
Yes.
after we get the results of the study.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Any questions on that? Jim?
So have we applied for the CON, or are we just waiting until the end? I'm confused on that part.
We have not applied for the
Okay.
CON yet. Our outside counsel has advised that we wait to get the final report from the study, and then we will start to get everything prepared to apply for the CON.
Anything else? Or is that enough?
That's enough for today.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. County Administrator, you're back up. So we have some items here that are for public session, a couple items that will require us to go into executive session. The coroner's local law is first up. I think let's try to stay in public session here, but that being said, let's try to avoid any discussions on the employment history of any particular people, whether they're elected or appointed or whatever, and just stick to the policy itself and local law itself and any updates on that.
Yes, so I recognize that there probably is a need to have some guidance for our coroners, and I asked Allison if she would draft a local law that would provide some guidance. And I'm looking at specifically 2 issues that have come up in the past. One would be on a conflict of interest and defining what would be a conflict of interest and having some remedies available should somebody say there is a conflict. And the second is having an actual system of rotation amongst the coroners. And so we do have a draft of a local law. It's not quite ready to be presented because there are questions. Obviously, it's this board's decision on what to do with this. I think the conflict of interest part is pretty straightforward. We just would be asking that our coroners inform people when they meet with them that there are a list of funeral homes within the county or outside of the county that they could go to, and that they not recommend any particular funeral home, but let people make their own decision on where to go. I think that one's pretty straightforward. The other one on rotation is a little bit more complicated because there would be a number of ways to rotate a coroner. And obviously, we have 2 coroners that have businesses in close proximity to Wellsville, which has the highest amount of population, as well as the hospital. And then we have 2 on the other side of the county, I believe 1 in Cuba and 1 in the Fillmore area. If you did a pure rotation system and not looking at where people are, I think you're going to find that people are going to decline. You might have someone in Fillmore declining a call if it's down in Independence. And you might end up back to where we're at now. But that is one thing you could do, is just pure rotation. The other thing you could do is maybe look and have a mix and say, if there is a call within the town that the coroner is located, then you would just rotate calls, or they would get that call unless there's more than one coroner in there, and then they would rotate that. And then if it's any other town other than the one they're located, we would do a pure rotation. Some counties have gone to looking at a similar system but using miles rather than town, remembering that this needs to go through dispatch. This needs to be easy for them to figure out. And I think if you look at miles between where the call is and where the coroner is located, that would be very, very difficult for dispatch to do efficiently. And they have other duties as well.
Can I stop you real quick here? Do all calls for coroners to go through 911?
They would under this local law. Right now, they don't have to. You could have the state police calling a coroner directly, the hospital calling a coroner directly. Many do go through dispatch, but not all. This local law would make it so they would all have to go through dispatch. And if a coroner receives a phone call from someone other than dispatch, they would call dispatch and notify them, and dispatch would determine if it was their turn on the rotation or if it needed somebody else to be called first.
Gotcha. Jan?
When you talk about where the coroners are currently located, this is an elected position, correct?
Correct.
So that, you really can't take that into consideration because that's what they are now. But in the future, they might be located in totally different areas.
Correct. So again, I only want to take that into consideration because if we have the same coroners going forward, we might end up with the same results if we do pure rotation, because the person in Fillmore or Cuba might not want to go to any other calls. And the people down in Wellsville might not want to go to the top of the. I think you just need to think about that before you make a decision. There is no probably right or wrong answer on that.
Okay, so any other questions or comments? So what's the plan? To come up with something and then present it to the board?
Correct, this fall. We were hoping to have it done a little earlier this year, but as Allison just mentioned, we've given her a number of policies and local laws to update this year, all very important. And this one we have a good draft of, but I do need a little bit of guidance on what you want to do with the rotation.
You want board guidance?
I would want board guidance. It's your local law, so I think you're going to make the decision at the end. I don't want to present a local law and then have you tell me that's not the rotation system you want.
Well, I think go ahead, Jan.
Well, I just have a question about the rotation. I mean, to me, that makes the most sense and fair way to do it. So if someone says, no, I can't respond, then you go to the next person? And does that bump that person to the bottom that you originally called, or would they be next in line for the next call?
I think it would bump them to the bottom if you were doing a pure rotational system. And again, we do want to make sure this is something that's easy for our dispatchers to understand and work with.
And your corners.
Correct.
I think Jan's right. I think that is the most fair. I don't think it's the most logistically sensible. I think you're gonna find, I have no idea, but I would imagine most of your deaths are in your population centers. And so you're gonna have maybe somebody up in Centerville, a coroner up in Centerville that's on a rotation with 3 other people that's just constantly refusing, calls. It's fair, but I think I'm sure it slows things down. And what if you get somebody in Centerville, this is just hypothetical, what if you get somebody in Centerville that says, absolutely, I'm going to go to every call I get in Independence, and it's an hour and 10 minutes to drive from Centerville to Independence? Is that the appropriate thing to do? I don't know the answer to that. When you have somebody in, say, Wellsville that can be there in 15 minutes.
And it is a county-wide position, so the powers and duties of the coroner, although there's 4 of them, they all have the same jurisdictional boundaries. So again, it could be, I just want to caution that if we do the pure rotation, we might find we're back to the same result, because people might decline and just wait for one in their town. I don't know.
This reminds me of the tow truck issue, which is another thing where tow truck drivers ponder, why aren't I getting calls for pickups? How does that work out of 911?
I absolutely know nothing about tow trucks. So as far as I know, we have no responsibility for tow trucks.
Legislator Sear might know.
I don't. Thank you,
Oh,
though,
okay,
President.
sorry. What do you got?
I have some questions for our county attorney. I'd like to call an attorney-client session, please.
Okay, we're in attorney-client.
You want, is it public?
Would you like
attorney-client?
to-
Okay.
You don't have to vote on attorney-client.
No, you don't have to vote, but we do need to excuse people. So,
Yep. All right, we're going to pause the public meeting, and we're going to go to an attorney-client.